In my family, there were two kinds of sound: the applause from my older sister Morgan and the background noise. That was me, Eliza. I was 21, standing in the kitchen of our sterile white McMansion, one of those houses where everything is for show and nothing is for comfort. I was looking out the window as my father, Brian, handed Morgan the keys to a brand new car. It even had a giant red bow on the hood, a reward for her big promotion. I just stood there, holding a wet dish rag, watching them laugh. The main song was playing at full volume, and I was just the static. Have you ever felt like background noise in your own life, while someone else was always the main song? Let me know your story in the comments below. Morgan, my older sister, was in public relations. That's what she told people. It meant she was shiny, loud, and obsessed with appearances. She was the one who brought home achievements. My younger sister, Paige, was 19. She was the baby, a role she played perfectly. If Paige spilled wine on the white carpet, she'd just giggle, and my dad would call it a happy accident. And then there was me. I was the cleaner of happy accidents, the listener, the one who made the coffee, the one who remembered everyone else's birthdays. I used to think it was just carelessness, that I was just the quiet one. But I learned that in families like mine, it's not accidental. It's a system. Psychologists call it the golden child and the scapegoat dynamic. In a dysfunctional family, roles are assigned. The golden child, Morgan, exists to bring glory to the parents. She's the reflection of their success. The scapegoat? Well, that's where you dump all the disappointment, the frustration, and the exhaustion. That was me. I wasn't invisible because I lacked value. I was invisible because that was my job. I had to be the background noise so Morgan could be the song. I had to be dull so she could be shiny. I realized this with perfect, cold clarity on my 21st birthday. The day started with silence. No happy birthday, no card on the counter, just a text from my dad, Brian, reminding me that it was trash day. Morgan was out celebrating her promotion all day. I told myself it didn't matter. I went to my part-time job at the campus library, came home, and baked myself a small cake. Just a little round vanilla thing with store-bought frosting. I put a single candle in it and set it on the kitchen counter. I waited. Around 8 p.m., the front door flew open. Morgan, Paige, and my dad came in, laughing, carrying shopping bags and empty champagne bottles from the celebration. Morgan was glowing. "It was perfect, Dad. Just perfect," she said, tossing her coat onto the chair I just cleaned. "Only the best for my #1 girl," Brian said, beaming at her. They all walked right past me. They walked past the kitchen counter, past the little cake with its one unlit candle. Not one of them glanced at it. My dad just pointed to the sink. "Eliza, you didn't run the dishwasher? We've got no clean glasses for tomorrow." I looked at the sink. It was full of their morning coffee mugs and breakfast plates. I looked at my little cake, and I understood. This wasn't forgetfulness. This was a balance sheet. And on their balance sheet, I simply didn't exist. Morgan was the asset. I was just a liability, the cost of maintenance. I stood there in the sterile quiet of that kitchen, and the anger wasn't hot. It was cold. It was the kind of cold that makes things clear. I didn't need to be invisible for them anymore. I just needed to be gone. That night, I went up to my room. I listened to Morgan and Paige laughing down the hall. I looked at my small, untouched cake. I didn't cry. I didn't write an angry note. I just opened an old backpack. I packed a few shirts, my toothbrush, and the $300 I'd saved from my library job. I walked downstairs. The house was silent, finally. I put my house key on the counter right next to the little cake with its single unlit candle. And I walked out. The silence that followed me out the door was the same silence that had lived there for 21 years. The only difference was, this time I was choosing it. Fast forward 3 years. I'm 24 now. I live in Philadelphia, in a room in an old group house with sloping floors and drafty windows. It's messy, it's loud, and it's the first real home I've ever had. My roommate Cody plays guitar badly and always leaves exactly half a pot of soup for me when he cooks. I didn't work at the library anymore. I worked the 5 a.m. shift at an artisan bakery downtown. That sterile McMansion smelt like chemical polish and cold air. My new life smelled like butter, burnt sugar, and roasting coffee. It was the smell of effort. My manager was a woman in her 50s named Sandra, but everyone just called her Sal. She was tough, saw everything, and didn't believe in shortcuts. On my first day, she showed me the proofing docs. It was just a big, warm, humid metal cabinet where the bread dough sat in the dark. She pointed to it. "This is the most important part of the bakery, Eliza. You can't rush this." She tapped the metal door. "Dough needs time, darkness, and warmth to rise. You gotta respect that. The best things grow in silence." I thought about that a lot. I also learned about a new kind of kindness, the kind that doesn't come with a price tag. At home, every good thing was transactional. I got good grades, I was quiet, I cleaned the kitchen, and in return, I was allowed to exist in their space. Love was a payment for services rendered. Here, it was different. I remember about a month into the job, I was pulling a huge tray of almond croissants out of the oven. I was moving too fast, tired from class. My hand slipped, and the entire tray, dozens of them, crashed onto the floor. I froze. My whole body tensed up, bracing for the yelling, bracing for the "You're so clumsy, Eliza," or the "Can't you do anything right?" That was the currency at home. I just stood there, staring at the mess, and said, "I'm so sorry, Sal. I'll pay for them." Sal just looked at the floor, then at me. She didn't raise her voice, she just sighed, grabbed a broom, and handed it to me. "Don't be stupid. Nobody's paying for anything. It's just flour and butter." She nudged my shoulder. "That's why we make them in batches, kid. Clean it up. We've got 10 minutes before the next round." I just stood there for a second. No yelling, no guilt. Just a problem that needed solving. That night, I came home to my messy apartment, and Cody had left a note on the counter next to a bowl of soup. "Heard you had a rough one. Eat this." This is what I learned in those 3 years. The kindness from my found family, from Sal and Cody, it wasn't transactional. It was covenantal. It wasn't a trade. It was a promise. It was given freely, just because I was there. And it was a warmth I had never known. I was finally, quietly rising. For 3 years, my life was built on that new, quiet foundation. The bakery in the morning, and in the afternoons, I worked as an assistant at a historical archive. It was a job I loved. It was the opposite of my family's house. It was a place where silent, meticulous work was the entire point. I spent my days handling fragile documents, breathing in the dry, sweet smell of old paper. My world was small, and it was mine. Then one Tuesday, I was in the archive basement, carefully cataloging old city maps. My phone, which was always on silent, buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out, expecting a text from Cody about groceries. My heart didn't just drop. It froze. The name on the screen was Morgan. 3 years, 1,095 days of absolute, uninterrupted silence. And now her name was glowing on my phone. I felt a cold shock, like touching a live wire. It wasn't sadness. It was the old familiar dread, the feeling of an alarm bell ringing somewhere deep inside me. I let it ring until it stopped. A second later, a text message. I opened it. It read, "Eliza, call me back. Urgent." That was it. Not, I miss you. Not, are you okay? Not, I'm sorry. Just a command. I stared at the words. Urgent. I thought about how my 21st birthday hadn't been urgent. My leaving hadn't been urgent. My entire existence for 3 years hadn't been urgent. I put the phone back in my pocket. I didn't answer. I went back to the map, but my hands were shaking. The spell was broken. The background noise was trying to get back in. I didn't reply. For the rest of the day, I felt like I was walking underwater. That evening, as I was walking home, it buzzed again. This time, it was my father, Brian. I stood on the sidewalk, the sound of traffic rushing past me. I declined Morgan's call, but this was different. This was the man who had watched me be invisible and done nothing. I answered, mostly just to gather information. Hello? His voice was thin, nervous. Eliza? Eliza, is that you? It's me. My voice was flat, clinical. Oh, thank God. Eliza, where have you been? Morgan said, things are just terrible. I leaned against a cold brick wall. Terrible how, Dad? It's just... He was fumbling, the way he always did when Morgan wasn't telling him what to say. Your sister, it's all a mess. You need to come home, Eliza. The family needs you. Needs hit me like a stone. They had never needed me. They had used me, but never needed me. Needs me for what? There was a long pause on his end. I could hear him breathing. Eliza, just... Please, it's about the house. We need to talk to you about the house. My blood went cold. Not, we miss you. Not, we're sorry. It was about the house. The McMansion. The sterile white box I'd left 3 years ago. I'll think about it, I said. It was a lie. I hung up before he could answer. I stood there on the street, and the anger I felt was sharp and precise. After 3 years, they weren't calling for me. They were calling for something I could do for them. It was just a transaction. It had always been a transaction. The only question was, what was it? I agreed to meet them, not because I wanted to see them, but because I needed to know the why. A transaction requires all the terms to be on the table. We met at a generic coffee shop off the highway, halfway between my new life and my old one, neutral ground. I got there 20 minutes early and chose a booth at the back corner, a place where I could see the door. I didn't buy anything. I just sat and waited, my hands resting on the table, perfectly still. They walked in together, and the change was shocking. My father, Brian, looked like he had aged a decade. His shoulders were slumped, and the confidence he always had around Morgan was gone. Morgan, she was the real shock. The golden child was tarnished. Her shiny hair was dull, tied back in a messy bun. She was wearing a wrinkled sweatshirt, no makeup, and her eyes were puffy and red. The PR mask was gone. This was the raw, panicked person underneath. They slid into the booth opposite me. The air was thick with their anxiety. Eliza, my dad started, his voice cracking. You look good. I just nodded. I didn't return the pleasantry. I wasn't there for small talk. I was there for the invoice. Morgan, to her credit, didn't waste time. Maybe the panic had burned through her usual manipulations. We're in trouble, Eliza. Bad trouble. I waited. The promotion, she said, looking down at her hands. The car, it was all a lie. My job, I was covering my expenses with company cards. It snowballed. I kept thinking I could fix it before anyone noticed. She was talking fast, the words spilling out. I used Dad's name for a few credit cards to cover the first hole, and then it's all gone. They're going to press charges. The bank is foreclosing on the house. I stared at her, not with pity, not with anger, but with a kind of slow, cold clarity. The McMansion, the symbol of their perfect, hollow life, was built on fraud. "What do you from me?" I asked. My voice was low, steady, clinical. My dad leaned forward, his hands trembling. "We have one option. The bank agreed to a consolidation loan, a second mortgage to cover what she owes, and stop the foreclosure." He wouldn't look at me. "But our credit it's ruined. We need a cosigner." I felt the last piece of the puzzle click into place. It was so clean, so simple. "We just need you to sign, Eliza," he whispered. It's $75,000. $75,000. I didn't laugh. I didn't gasp. I just stared at him. After 3 years of silence, they didn't call for a daughter. They called for a credit score. I wasn't family. I was a financial instrument. I sat back, letting the silence stretch. I watched them, watched the hope and fear warring in their eyes. 3 years, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "You didn't call for 3 birthdays. You didn't call when the pandemic hit. You didn't even know if I was alive. Why now? Why didn't you ever try to call before?" Morgan stammered. We were busy. We thought you were just..." "No," my dad cut in, his voice breaking. He finally looked at me, and his eyes were full of a weakness I'd never seen. "That's not true." He looked at Morgan, a flash of anger in his eyes. "You tell her what you told us." Morgan's face went pale. "Dad, don't." "Tell her," he demanded. I looked at Morgan. She was trapped. I told them you were in trouble," Morgan whispered, her eyes fixed on the table. "I told them you'd gotten mixed up with some bad people, that you said you didn't want to be contacted, that you were angry and you'd just come home when you were ready." The air left my lungs. It wasn't a gasp. It was a slow, silent emptying. It wasn't just neglect. It wasn't just that I was the background noise. She had actively, systemically cut me off. She had built a wall around them to make sure I stayed the scapegoat, the failure, the one in trouble. She had made my invisibility a policy. I looked from her, the saboteur, to my father, the coward who believed her. And I felt absolutely nothing. The debt was finally calculated. I looked at Morgan, the saboteur. I looked at my father, the accomplice. And the final chain link in my head clicked into place. All the years of being background noise, all the missed birthdays, the sink full of dishes on my 21st birthday. It wasn't just negligence. It was a strategy. I had to be the failure so she could be the star. Morgan's face was desperate. "Eliza, please. It's $75,000. It's nothing to a bank. You have good credit. We checked. Well, we assumed." My dad jumped in, his voice pleading. "We'll pay you back, honey. Every penny. This is your family. You can't just let us lose the house. You can't let this happen to Morgan." I thought about my little vanilla cake with its single unlit candle. I thought about Sal handing me a broom instead of a bill. I thought about Cody's note next to a bowl of soup. I looked at these 2 people who had flown into a panic, not because I was missing, but because my credit score was. I gave them the only word I had left, the only one that mattered. No. The word just hung in the air. It was small and quiet and harder than steel. Morgan's face crumpled, but not into sadness, into rage. "No? What do you mean, no? After everything we've done for you? You're just going to sit there and be this selfish? We are your family." "You're destroying us!" my father yelled. Actual volume. Actual passion. Where was this passion when I was getting straight A's? Where was it on my birthday? "How can you be so cold, Eliza? We're on the edge of losing everything." Cold? I repeated. The word didn't even sting. I'd spent 21 years setting myself on fire just to keep them warm. I gave them my time, my energy, my silence, my obedience. And now that I refused to hand over my future, I was cold? I stood up. The movement was slow, deliberate. I took a $5 bill from my wallet and placed it on the table to cover the coffee I never drank. "That's not my debt to pay," I said. I turned and walked out of the coffee shop. I didn't look back. On the bus ride home to Philadelphia, my phone exploded. It was a barrage of shrapnel. A text from my younger sister, Paige, the one who never had to work for anything. "You're a monster, Eliza. I hope you're happy." Then one from Brian. "You've made your choice. You've abandoned this family. Don't bother calling us again until you're ready to fix what you broke." I sat there, watching the dark countryside rush past the window, and I felt a familiar twinge. It was the old programmed instinct. Guilt. The feeling that you're bad for escaping. The feeling that you're cruel for surviving. But then I thought about what that word family really meant to them. It wasn't love. It was an obligation. It was a one-way contract where I was the only one paying the premiums. And I realized the truth. You do not have to set yourself on fire to keep warm the very people who pushed you out into the cold. This wasn't an act of revenge. It was an act of accounting. My compassion had been a luxury they'd overdrafted for years, and the account was finally closed. My coldness was just a balanced budget. I wasn't abandoning them. I was refusing to let them pull me under with them. I wasn't destroying their lives. I was just, finally, saving my own. The guilt wasn't mine to carry. It was theirs. The bus pulled into my neighborhood in Philly. I got off, the air sharp and clean. I didn't feel angry. I didn't feel triumphant. I just felt quiet. And for the first time, the quiet felt like peace. When I got back to my apartment in Philadelphia, the first thing I did was take a hot shower. I felt like I was washing off 3 years of silence and a lifetime of residue. I made a cup of tea. I sat on my lumpy couch, looked at my phone buzzing on the table, and I did the simplest, most powerful thing I've ever done. I opened my contacts. Brian, delete. Morgan, delete. Paige, delete. I blocked their numbers. I blocked them on every social media platform I could find. It wasn't angry. It was just housekeeping. You don't keep trash in your house just because you've owned it for a long time. My roommate Cody came home later. He saw me sitting there in the quiet and just wordlessly slid a bowl of noodles in front of me. I smiled. It was all the validation I needed. That night, I slept for 8 straight hours. No nightmares. No waking up at 3 a.m. wondering what I'd done wrong. The next morning, I was at the bakery by 5 a.m. The air was thick with the smell of yeast and warm sugar. Sal was already there, covered in flour, sliding trays into the oven. She looked up as I tied my apron. "You're quiet today, kid. Everything okay?" I nodded, feeling a smile I didn't have to fake. "Yeah, Sal, everything is." I went to the proofing box. I opened the heavy metal door and looked inside. In the warm, dark, humid quiet, rows and rows of dough were rising. They were doubling in size, full of life, all in perfect, powerful silence. Sal was right. The best things grow in the dark. They don't need applause. They just need warmth and time. I used to be the background noise in someone else's song. Then, for a long time, I was the silence of an empty room. Today, I'm still the silence, but it's a different kind. It's not the hollow silence of being forgotten. It's the full, rich silence of the proofing box. It's the sound of growth. If this story resonated with you, please share it with anyone who needs to be reminded that their value is not decided by someone else's applause. Thank you for listening.